Alrighty, we are rolling. My name is Angelo Smanillis. I am the founder of Sales Fusion IO. We help tech and services companies that are still doing founder-led sales to add up to $250,000 per month within 90 days, guaranteed. And we do it pretty heavily on performance because we just believe in that. Now, in this video, I'll keep this pretty brief. Should only be 5 minutes or so. But I was having a conversation yesterday with one of my friends that is also in similar space, and we were just mapping out our own kind of targets for next year and mapping out some numbers that we were wanting to hit on a separate sheet. This is just a copy that I made of that one, and these are different numbers, but nevertheless, we were just doing that exercise, just kind of having a conversation about it and hypothesizing on, different levers that we can pull, both easy and, more difficult ones to achieve an end goal, and then set a plan and a strategy based on these specific kind of KPIs to be outlined for ourselves and our teams. So, nevertheless, I thought I'd make a video on it just to explain why it's a useful thing to do and why you would want to do it instead of just like flying blind for an entire year and being reactive to your situation. But nevertheless, essentially what this practice will allow you to do is map out basically reverse engineer what you have to do to hit a specific goal. Okay, so on a model here, the numbers work out to about 2.2 million in net revenue and about 3 million, I believe. Yeah, almost 3.2 million in gross revenue. So I'll just explain this here. This is mainly an outbound driven kind of strategy. So we're just using outbound like outreaches as the main marketing method. So you have our number of outreaches, number of opens, MQLs, which is marketing qualified leads, people that respond to the marketing in some way, but you haven't met with them. Then we have meetings, shown meetings or intro to meetings or discoveries, SQLs, sales qualified leads, closed deals, ACV, average contract value per month, and your monthly churn, your average customer lifetime in months and years, your LTV based on your churn, then your COGS, existing customers, gross revenue, net revenue. Okay. Now, let's say you are a business that has 10 customers that pay you $4,000 a month. Your churn rate is let's say you're like a service-based business and you don't have a great churn and it's kind of high, but you do a lot of outreach and you have a pretty decent sales process, close at 15%. We use that as the assumption. And you do outbound at 5,000 contacts per month. I'll show you the difference in what these levers that you can pull will do and why you should actually map this out and understand preemptively what those levers and adjustments will allow you to do before actually getting into April, May, September, whatever the month is, and then having to be reactive to your situation based on how you or your team is performing. Here we can actually map out and set a specific plan and target for what we want to hit every month to hit our North Star and whatever that goal is, and we're just reverse engineering it. So anyways, this assumption here means, the outcome of this would be $1 million in net revenue, okay, and 1.5 million in gross. So how do you hit these numbers, right? What's the assumption here? So the assumption is that you have 10 customers that are paying you $4,000 a month, okay, and you closed an extra 3 deals in January based on your outreach here. Okay, so these are like your outbound numbers. Let's say if you were to do some outreach, get a 50% open rate. Let's actually change that. It's unlikely if you haven't done outbound before to get anything higher than that. Let's say you can more conservatively generate 2% MQLs, meetings at 20%, but probably only close a deal or half a deal on average per month, right? So it might actually take you more like 2 months to close your first deal there, depending on this volume. But nevertheless, let's take a look here. Okay, so we are assuming that you're just going to stay the course at 5,000 outreaches per month and nothing else changes. Okay, so if you're to do that, have half of them open, have 2% of them turn into MQLs, 20% of those people get into meetings, 80% of them show up, 80% qualified, you'd like maybe close roughly one of those deals, right? This is rounding up even. So best case scenario, you're closing like one deal here, using these numbers. Your net would actually be 545,000, gross would be 779,000. Okay, so this is like the baseline. You're going to end the year with 21 customers. You would have started with 10 and ended the year with 21. Okay, so using our assumptions here, or sorry, structure, and to having a view here of how things would be if we just stayed the course basically the entire year. This is like a very conservative assumption that we're using. But let's say, for instance, and I'll just give you an example of how drastic the change can be as you start to pull on these different levers and improve your sales process, outbound, closing, so on and so forth. Okay, maybe even your ACP, increase that to 5,000 per month. Okay, so let's actually start with the outreaches. Let's say for January, kind of test some things. Maybe January, February, you test your messaging and validate it out, and you stay at 5K per month. And then in March, you want to target 7,500 per month and finish off Q1 at 7,500 per month. Let's say that goes well and you hit your numbers, you hit your targets. The plan would be to increase that maybe for Q2, 10,000 per month, and then come Q4, if that goes well, you increase it to 15,000 per month. This is new contacts engaged every month. Okay, and of course your addressable market needs to permit for, in this scenario, 125,000 people. Okay, now let's say you can increase your close rate. Let's say the first 2 months it's 50%, or let's say the first month it's 50%, second month it's 60%, and then you're able to kind of coast for the rest of the year at 70% opens. Okay, I haven't even touched anything else. Okay, so I've just adjusted outreaches and opens, right? So increased our outreach volume and increased our open rate by 10% the first month, and then by another 10% come March. And then you kind of coast at 70% moving forward. I've seen these numbers. Okay, I know it seems high, possibly, but I've seen these numbers. I've achieved these numbers, so it's doable. Okay, now we can see that just off of increasing our opens and outreaches, that's another like $300,000 in net revenue. Okay, and roughly the same, I believe, in gross revenue. I forget what the other the previous gross was. I think it was around 800,000. But nevertheless, you can see you're doing over 50% more revenue just off of increasing your outreaches and opens. Okay, so your activity basically. Now let's say you can increase your MQL numbers, right, or MQL rate to 3.5%, right, which isn't too difficult. Again, just from that lever, if you do a little bit better in your outbound messaging, right, and your offer is a little bit stronger, you can get more marketing qualified leads raising their hand from the outbound. You will add another roughly $200,000, over 200,000 actually, closer to 300,000 to your net revenue. Okay, again, that's just, we're not even pulling, we haven't pulled every lever there yet. Okay, so just optimizing your volume, open rate, and outbound campaigns with everything else staying constant, you are already around 1.2 million net, 1.7 million gross revenue. Okay, and before that, in our first model there, we were only at about 500,000 net in 700 or 800,000 gross. Okay, so you can see how important it is to understand this stuff, and you won't understand this until you actually play with these numbers for yourself and figure out what your numbers actually would look like. I know we're going over that 5-minute mark, but nevertheless, I think this will be useful, so stick around. Nevertheless, let's say you can convert to meetings at 20%. I don't think over 20%, it's tough to do. Okay, so let's not even mess with that. Let's just assume a 20% meeting booking rate on your SQLs, or sorry, your MQLs. And let's say 80% of those calls that you book on the calendar show up. Okay, that's really going to be the, you might be able to get that higher, but that's going to be pretty good as it stands. And then 80% qualified, again, that's already very strong, so we'll leave that there. But let's say you close at 15% in maybe January and February. In March, you're able to increase that to 20%, and then April, maybe you finish off Q1 at 20%, and by Q2 you're closing at 22.5%. Okay, and let's say Q2, your average close rate is 22.5%, and then Q4, sorry, oh, my apologies, I was actually viewing this in thirds. So let's say the first third of the year, your close rate is 15%, or sorry, 15% with the first 2 months, 20% for the next 2 months, and then the second third of the year, your close rate is 22.5%, and then the last third, you achieve a 25% close rate. Okay. Now, if you can just increase your close rate by a total of 10% over the course of an entire year, okay, starting from January, that will now add another 400,000, okay, to your bottom line. If you can increase your close rate sooner than that, again, you'll do even better. And let's say you're able to increase your, improve your churn rate halfway through the year, and now you're only experiencing a 5% churn, double your LTV. Okay, what does that look like? Okay, so you're now doubling your LTV halfway through the year, so that will affect your outcomes quite significantly. But nevertheless, playing with these numbers and just essentially seeing what you need to achieve month over month will give you and your team a good insight into what you need to actually adjust as you're going about your activities month over month. And something that I do in addition to mapping out the entire year like this, and there are additional variables and other sales channels that you might want to consider here aside from just outbound, you can always add that in. But now what you want to do to take this step further is every month, right? Let's say February 1st, you evaluate January. Okay, so you set your targets with your team for January. At the end of the month or beginning of February, you evaluate, okay, January, how close did we come to hitting these numbers? Did we hit them? Did we not hit them? Did we surpass them? Okay, and that way you have an idea of, what you need to change, right? How you need to adjust. And if you do hit your numbers, then that's a strong leading indicator going into the next month, right? And then, so on and so forth, okay? And if you're hitting your numbers by, May or June or July or whatever, then that you are on pace to hit your goal by the end of the year. Okay, so without having this mapped out beforehand and actually creating a plan for how you're going to, increase your monthly outreaches from 5,000 all the way to 15,000 by September, right? You need to plan for that ahead of time. Without doing that and doing that across the board for, how are we going to increase our close rate by 10% this year? Okay, how are we going to maintain an 80% qualification and show up rate? Right, if you don't know these things and can't set that benchmark at the beginning of the year, you're just going to be reacting and basically flying blind. So it's a good way to miss your targets or miss your goals if you're not setting a plan and an actual roadmap for how to get there. And then to even lay out a strategy, which many companies do at this time of year, without understanding what the strategy will lead to and what the actual numbers that you're trying to, the outcome of that strategy that you're going to be carrying out over the course of months and the year. Without having that target, there's no weight to laying out any strategy, right? Because you have no KPIs and targets to measure against. But anyways, I will wrap it up here. I hope this was useful, and I feel like it's a pretty straightforward thing to understand. So I'll leave a link to this sheet. Feel free to make a copy and add any other things that you want to it, or just use it as is if you'd like. But nevertheless, appreciate the time. If you need help with any of this stuff, or want to see, or even just help, building out one of these models for yourself in your company, I'm happy to jump on a call and do it with you, and see if we can help in any way. But again, I appreciate the time, and see you in the next one.